Historical fiction from Scotland, a serialized picaresque novel, and modern Venezuela. What do these have to do with each other? It's part of what I've read so far in the month of January. Welcome to another reading roundup. My name is Greg, and this is Ghost Readers in the Sky. The first book I finished in January is from BookTube's own Margaret Pinard. It's called The Keening, and it is the first in a trilogy known as Remnants. This came out in 2015. I read this in ebook format that I checked out from my local public library. There is so much to like about this book. This book is set in Scotland shortly after the end of the Napoleonic Wars. So we're in the 1820s. A lot of the Scots have been off fighting with the British Army against Napoleon, and they return, and the world is different. Now, from the title of this book, The Keening, you know it's going to be sad. But I still just was not ready for all of the really horrible events that happened to the family that we're following. I was completely devastated by an incident early in the book, and there were quite a few other places where I was at least partially devastated. It is sad. But it's really well done. The strength and the tenacity and the perseverance that this family has is just wonderfully expressed. The settings are just described in a superb way. I enjoyed everything about how the islands were talked about, how the cities were talked about, some of what happens on their travels and the different ways of conveyance that the family uses to move around. The descriptions, just perfect. They're not overdone. They're not overblown. We really do have an ensemble cast. The younger children don't get as much time, but the two older children and the parents, we have a chance to learn about all of them. And even though none of them is fleshed out individually, they are, as a family unit, really well described. The relationships between each of the people and how they all relate to each other, remarkable. And I kind of like not having a specific main character, because this book is about a family unit, the things that happen to them and the way that they address them. Highly, highly recommended. I thought this was a fantastic book. Second book that I read in January, or at least finished in January, was The Pickwick Papers by Charles Dickens, a group read for the Dickens at Christmas event. This was written in 1837. I borrowed a printed copy from my public library. I also used Project Gutenberg. and I got an audiobook to go along with it. Again, something I borrowed from the public library. The audiobook was narrated by David Timson. So this is the story of Samuel Pickwick. He's an eccentric, well-to-do gentleman, and he is the founder of the Pickwick Club, and he leads his club members through a number of adventures. There are romantic encounters, there are duels, there are court trials, there are carriage wrecks, and so much more. Samuel Pickwick himself is such a wonderful, jovial character. He is the benefactor that we all wish we had, who gives freely and openly and expects nothing. I almost think of him as the anti-Scrooge. Everything that Scrooge did to hoard his money and make the people around him miserable, Pickwick uses his money to help make people around him happy. And then Pickwick's companions, as well as his adversaries, are really well drawn. One of the favorites is his valet, his gentleman's gentleman, Sam Weller, or Veller. They can't decide how to pronounce it. Neither can Sam nor his father. And I understand that when Sam Veller was introduced in the serialization, the readership went up orders of magnitude. And then we get Snodgrass and Tupman and Winkle and others from the club whose adventures are mixed in with Pickwick's. And then we get to meet a lot of characters from country estates and from resorts and from debtor prisons and boarding houses and a whole lot of taverns. The only problem that I had with this is that, well, this was serialized from 1837 to 1838 over, I believe, a course of 19 issues. And it's now published in one very thick volume. It has been split up into 3 separate volumes. I think I would have enjoyed that more. I think I would have really enjoyed it serialized, because these are primarily, not exclusively, but primarily interconnected short stories. And I think I really would have enjoyed reading them one story at a time every month or so as they came out. I think if they had been, there were some really clear delineations between this adventure is over and we're starting the next one. And I think that's where the 3 volumes are split up. I think I would have enjoyed that as well. This one just toward the end got really tough for me to keep going. But I did, and I enjoyed it all. It just was a lot in one volume. But I love these characters and all of the stories that are told and the misunderstandings, always fun. The various intersecting plot lines and the decisions that get made and the consequences of those, and how things get resolved. And I really love everything about this book, except the way it was packaged as one single, very large book, rather than being broken up into some smaller pieces. So were it differently packaged, I think my enjoyment would have been even greater. The next book I finished was specifically because of the recent invasion by the United States into Venezuela and the kidnapping of the president and his wife. And I wanted to know more about Venezuela. I knew a little bit about Chavez and Maduro, but not enough. I did not feel informed. And so I went and tried to see what I could get from the library that would help me understand Venezuela. And I borrowed the audiobook from my library, a book called Things Are Never So Bad That They Can't Get Worse. Inside the Collapse of Venezuela by William Newman, and this was narrated by Michael Manuel. Our author, William Newman, he spent about 15 years in Venezuela. He was first a reporter and then later the Andes bureau chief for the New York Times. And so his work covers the two most recent administrations in Venezuela, Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro. This book was written in 2022, so Maduro was still the president at the end of this book. It kind of starts with the inauguration of Chavez. What he does really well is his interviewing. He interviews just such a wide variety of people. He goes all across Venezuela, and he talks to people from all walks of life, from politicians to bureaucrats to regular working people to people who are impoverished and have been for years. These are all just fascinating interviews because they show the whole spectrum of viewpoints. I don't know the whole spectrum, but they show a large spectrum of viewpoints held by the Venezuelan people. And he asks them, what they think about the government generally, the presidents, the bureaucracy, and socialism as an idea. And he is really good at drawing out some great information from the people. There are also, and I think this may be the most important part of the book as it relates both to then and now, he interviews a lot of U.S. politicians who were behind Operation Gideon in 2020. So it was a U.S.-backed coup attempt, and it failed. It was financially backed by the Venezuelan opposition, and they hired those wonderful mercenary firms that we have here in the United States. They hired Silvercorp USA, and Newman doesn't get to talk to the top brass, but he gets information that is directly from people who are in the room, and so he reports that these things were said by, and of course it is one step away from the original, so you have to take that with a grain of salt. But we hear from Donald Trump and Marco Rubio and John Bolton and Mike Pompeo and Mike Pence and other high-ranking people in the government. And this coup attempt looks so much like the one that actually happened just a couple weeks ago that it's I don't think that's coincidental by any means. The thing that I didn't like as much about this book is that Newman comes from the New York Times, and so he is deep into neoliberal philosophy and politics. And he really can't conceive of why people would vote for socialism when they're not seeing direct positive outcomes immediately. And even though it has been poorly implemented and it has caused some economic pain to the people of Venezuela, there are many Venezuelans who still believe that it is the right path forward. And Newman, our author, just can't wrap his head around that, around the idea of fighting for an idea. And I think that is somewhat different than the way we do things here in the United States. So I understand, but I think his neoliberal background, his working for the New York Times, who you remember was one of the big proponents that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and helped George Bush start his own war over there. They were completely complacent and probably guilty of warmongering or something, war crimes. I may not put that in there, but anyway, New York Times, I lost my respect for them. Maybe that's what I'll say. So Newman's neoliberal background and the fact that he works for the New York Times, I think, play against him sometimes in really understanding Venezuelan culture. When I listen to the people he's interviewing and why they continued to vote for Chavez and Maduro, even though their lives were not improving immediately, it made sense to me. I got it. And Newman just couldn't. And of course, I lost all respect for the New York Times when they pushed the Iraq has weapons of mass destruction and we should go to war over there. It was a lie. I think they knew it was a lie. And it's really hard to recover from that kind of that hoodwinking of the American people. I probably won't put that in. Newman also seems a bit blind to the role that colonialism and hegemony have played in the exacerbation of the decline of the Venezuelan economy. So certainly Chavez was not the greatest executive over the... He had great plans. He was not the tactical leader that Venezuela needed. Maduro, very similar. So the implementation was not well done. But they were fought at every turn, tooth and nail, primarily by the Americans, who the government has just not wanted anybody to have any power or money except them. So there are faults to this book, but despite all of that, understanding the attempted coup, Project Gideon in 2020, and the role of Silvercorp and the role of people who were high up in the Trump administration at the time and who still are high up in the Trump administration today, the just talking to people on the street, regular people who, some were true believers in socialism and some were not. but we get to hear some authentic voices from Venezuela. I think it's a good book to read if you want to understand what's going on in Venezuela today. It's new enough and the history is recent enough that I think it still has its value. Those are the books I finished so far in January. I also read a couple of poems in January on Poetry Thursday, Cowboy Poetry Thursday. I read Robert W. Service, his poem, The Passing of the Year. And I also read from Bruce Kiskadden, That Little Blue Roan. So 2 really fine poems. I'll link all of that below. So that basically covers what I read in this first half of January. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Thanks to all of you who watch this channel regularly and who like and comment and interact with me. I really enjoy that. It's been good to get to know people over this last year. So thank you so much for what you do. And until next time, my name is Greg. This is Ghost Readers in the Sky.
Yippee-yi-yi.